7:01 p.m. We're going to start this is the August meeting of the Virginia-Highland Board of Directors. And present is the entire board minus Ms. Carlisle, who is a personal engagement with her departing daughter to college, and Ms. Ferraro is working. And may we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Any modifications? John, do we know if...
She said she couldn't make it tonight. She'll be here in September.
All right, without objection is ordered. I see no police or fire or City of Atlanta officials, and we will move right to variance. Either you will, no, we don't. Jenny, I'll do it. We also have the...
Got the video.
Tape, so it works fine. Madam, we have B14-141, 885 Adair. It is Ms. Kohler.
Okay, I got your email about the date that I sent you.
We got it on here.
So there isn't really a date on here.
Well,
I don't
there it
know.
is. That's it, that's it.
Okay, it is that is the date, but I just didn't know
I can't, God, is it 7/8? Is that the date you want to get on there?
yeah,
It's very possible.
yeah, it's the date that, there's a date paid stamp on there, so that was the date that
We're gonna say it's 7/8/14. This is a Xerox, isn't it? Do you think it's original?
that's the one that they gave me.
Okay, thank you. We'll pretend it's 7/8.
There's a date paid stamp on there, and that was, I did it all the same way, so.
All right. Oh, I got it. All right, very quick.
Yes, so
Summary.
basically what the variance that we're asking for is this roof line currently is a flat roof. It's the back of the house, over the current laundry room that we're making a banquette. And it slopes down to 6 feet 8 inches, so we're raising the ceiling there to be 8 feet. Not a huge modification, but just kind of a normal ceiling. And then this is the existing porch. We are just asking to cover it. So we're not expanding the footprint at all.
In fact, I think it's being reduced. Is that correct? I didn't understand how it could be reduced. But
We're reducing the lot coverage.
the lot coverage,
Yeah.
because you're pulling out some other.
Yeah, because we are over the 50% now, and so we decided to do the piece out in the driveway, so we're down to like 49.7 or something.
Now, they wouldn't have needed a variance, I'll point out, for our approving folks in the audience, because they were already over 50, so they're, in any case, they weren't increasing the nonconformity, but we do love under 50, and so you're under, so I'll report to the planning committee that the site visit, there are no tree issues, there were no stormwater issues, very little was being altered except the slight reduction in lot coverage. Is that all the neighbor stuff we need there? Yes. So we have neighbor notification, the site and the planning committee recommended approval condition, site plan stamped and dated 7/8/14. It was never also the 7th, but was that the day before?
Yeah.
7/8/14, barely legible. So that's my motion. Is there a second? Second. Is there discussion or questions from anyone in the crowd or on the board for the applicant? All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. We'll see you next week. You know where to go next week? Chip and Pam do, if you don't.
Okay, I can ask them. I have the address.
Bring a book.
That's great.
You will not be out so quickly. But it's entertaining.
Okay.
Dan Hanlon, upstate, 62 Ponce Place.
Can you keep that paperwork in line?
I will let you take it back, so we already have copies of it. Why don't you give those, we don't need those anymore, so you got those back? Yeah. All right, good, thank you very
And do I need to
much.
bring anything different next week?
No, just bring all that stuff and your sense of humor.
Okay, thank you.
Why don't you hand up one or two? Hand one to Miss Corey there. Have you met Dan, Winnie?
I don't think so.
Winnie
Dan
Curry,
Hanlon.
Dan Hanlon.
Nice to meet you. Dan Hanlon with Red Level Renovations. We're representing Adam and Margaret Bain on their project. And the gist of the project is a rear addition, and then on top of that, a full second-story addition. And then the piece that actually requires the variance is a small bump out on the front for a little office. And that bump out protrudes into the existing front yard setback. It's 35 feet, and so we're asking for it to be reduced to 30 feet. It essentially just fills in the gap that's there now. There's a front porch on the right side and in the middle of the front of the house, and then there's this opening on the left, and so this little bump out will fill that space. So we have
Tree losses?
Pardon?
Any tree losses?
There was one tree loss, but it's essentially not associated with the project. It's within 5 feet of the rear foundation wall. So we're just taking that down. These are the neighbor notifications that were requested. And currently where we are on neighbor signatures, we haven't gotten any resistance. The homeowner's just kind of having trouble getting everybody. But he'll keep pursuing those.
Any question? And then there was one request, we asked you to do one thing with the stormwater.
Yep.
Which was from the new addition, which is to put it in the large, flat, well-grassed backyard, which will handle it without incident and not contribute any more stormwater to the system. And it's actually got a tree and sun back there, so that'll be happy, everybody will be happy. And Dan's agreed to go down and make that revision to the site plan. Are there any questions from anyone, board, audience? Mr. Hanlon? Well, the site plan, the planning committee recommendation was approval of V14-158. Conditioned on provision of proof of mailing. Are we okay on that, Jens? No, I know they're not signatures that have been mailed to everybody or got signatures.
Well, there's 5 here that were mailed, and I don't know, so you've got, this should be right, I'll double check it and let you know, it looks right.
And a site plan stamped and dated 7/23 revised to note that the stormwater pollution will be discharged in the rear yard. And that is the motion.
Second.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, well, thank you very much.
Is there other questions of any sort from anyone? Ready to vote? All in favor, please raise your hand. And we'll see you next week, sir.
Great.
And if you will, bring in that new note, and should be good. Thank you very much. V14-153, 700 Park Drive. Mr. Wright.
Fence was built.
I've already put the ugly truth in the notes here. Sans permit, sans variance.
Okay, great.
Just, yeah,
Looks like that.
right.
It's on the Elkmont side of this property.
And it actually constitutes a wall because it has no gaps in it.
Correct. And I'll just pass these around, but you can see it kind of.
So the applicant's
The way
come
that-
before is trying to rectify this omission.
Yes, and the way that the fence was built, it was an alternated pickets between 2x2s and, or sorry, 1x2s and 1x4s. So what was suggested to us by the committee was that we take out the smaller boards and basically create a 25% opening instead of the 50% that code requires. So that's what we have done. We did go down to the city and make that change. I don't know who needs that. We got that stamped. We originally had asked that the fence be kept the way it is, and that we would put plantings in front of it. We're still planning on doing that. Putting gardenia bushes, 13 to 15 of them across the whole span to basically help greenify it, if you will, and soften the quote-unquote wall. So that's the request.
I think the planning committee discussion was, I think the planning committee was moved by the fact that the fence is already set back some distance from the sidewalk and is up on a hill, and so that this salute to the spirit and letter of the law is helpful and will, it was a agreeable to the applicant, and the committee recommended approval upon the modification mentioned and described in file from 811. Questions or comments from Mr. Wright? Hearing none, I will make the motion to approve it conditioned on the site plan with the modifications described on the site plan dated 8/11/14. Any last moment questions or thoughts? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you very much for taking care of this. We will see you next week.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. E 14-117, 1221 Monroe Drive. Mr. Dirt and Mr. Knight. Would you, if you will, hand one to Ms. Curry. Y'all don't know her, but when he's,
Hello.
there's no one with a more distinguished record in planning.
I'm Mark.
in the City of
Site
Atlanta.
plan.
Ms. Curry. Say that safely.
I'm Paul Durek, the new owner of 1221, and we are proposing an addition to the east side wall of the house. We now have it under 50, just slightly under 50% lot coverage. We are asking for a variance, which would include the new setback of the gable at the rear, which would be in line with the original front gable on the north side of the property. There were, at the last meeting, there were requests for 2 changes, which we will complete, including a coverage from,
The 4-foot fence, and as well as mulch walkway in the front. And we just haven't had a site engineer today, in case y'all made any other recommendations tonight.
You're a wise man, but I don't think we anticipate that. What our agendas go, I was going to give you a list. Actually, this took a lot of work. This is an interesting proposal. The lot coverage is going, could have been noted, but I failed to put it on here, from 34% more or less to 49, now 0.97.
correct,
So they don't need a variance for that. There will obviously be a fair amount of additional stormwater. They sit up on near the top of a hill on Monroe. The water will discharge down the rear of the property. So substantively, it is designed to be caught and trapped in 4 flow wells. We've not had many flow wells used here, so I'm really interested to see how this works. It should work very well. It's a good site for it. And the water will collect the water. It functions as designed, and hold it underneath and dispense it in the ground, and eventually it'll be back in the groundwater, which is where we all want it.
and those are located at the south part.
Right,
Those 4 circles.
they're at the rear of the house right there, and they ought to function well. Mr. Knight, I'll let you explain, sir.
Basically, it's pretty much a 50-gallon drum, and they're in succession. And the water comes through, there's a gravel base, and it allows the water to seep out and be absorbed by the ground versus overflowing into neighbors' yards and the sewer system and whatnot. So it's just an environmental.
It's our understanding from the neighbors that that area of the lot is a collection for many neighbors of water that is.
So there were several areas of concern. I think they've all been successfully addressed, and we appreciate that. The parking pad is now up closer, which leaves room at the bottom, which is both sunny, like the previous applicant. This is rare combinations, but here too, sunny and wet. The conditions that we had in here, and I would have contacted you today if I'd only had the application with your phone number on there, but I didn't. But it's okay. I think we got it well. 3 new trees at the bottom. And
4, actually.
4. Excellent. We ask you to specify, if you will, on the site plans, what minimum size they will be and what species.
And that's on there.
Yes, 4-inch
Okay.
narrows.
What kind of oak are they?
They're called Georgia oak.
Well, I've never heard of a Georgia oak, but okay. It must be a willow oak, I'm thinking, but maybe I'm wrong. I'll look it up. There may be. You've got a pea gravel notation on there. You're going to switch to mulch, because believe it or not, the extra few feet would put you over 50%. The driveway, and this isn't noted on there, but the driveway will be left as it exists, those shared driveway with a neighbor on the south side,
Correct.
which is a concern to that neighbor, and which has an easement, and you'll repair any damage that's done to it at the end of construction, if there is any, which we don't anticipate.
Correct.
And so the fence, you'll note on the fence, the new fence will, which is a wall, was built illegally, but your grandfathered in on that, but it's coming down because you got a new driveway cuts over there. So you're gonna have a legal fence. Wow.
Nice, huh? Georgia.
It's beautiful. It's like a
It's,
water oak.
it's pretty much like a live oak.
Yeah, it's a live oak.
Cover above it.
One that will grow in this area.
I'm sorry?
One
One that's
that will grow here.
acclimated to your, okay. So I think we saw a lot of, this is a challenge, and a lot of effort went into it over a number of weeks, and we're really interested to see, in Grasscrete style hexagonal pavers, and that's
There's a photo.
a photo of the style of paver there, which substantively will support car weight, but allow a tremendous amount of infiltration of water. So I really hope this works. I know you do too, but we not only want it in now, we really want to see it work, and we'll be coming back constantly and bringing other people over to show them how they ought to do what you did. But I feel optimistic about it. The neighbors are good. How are we doing on the neighbor notification? Have you mailed,
We handle it.
delivered them
So
all?
they've had 2 deliveries concerning what we're doing. We've had a response from 1217 and from the neighbors down the way and across the catty corner to us. They just said more or less, welcome to the neighborhood. Other than that, no other response.
Okay, so here's what we need, and I hope we made it clear, and we might not have in all the dialogue. We definitely want you to mail copies of them, even though if you haven't got a signed signature, and you don't have to have a signed signature, but we want you to at least mail a copy of them to it. That way you are covered. There won't be anybody walking in at the last minute saying,
Mail a copy of what?
of the application and the plans to
Okay.
them, and send it with
Everything we delivered.
the ones, yeah, you also need to mail it. It's
Okay.
better to deliver it, but that way nobody will walk in and say, never saw him, don't know who that was, never heard of this.
Gotcha.
It covers you, it covers us, it covers everybody. So if you'll do that, get proof of mailing, you don't have to send it registered, they'll stamp it up at the Amsterdam post office for you for about $1.50 a whop, so. So questions for the applicant? Winnie?
So is the flow well only one barrel that holds 50
It'll
gallons?
be
No,
4
they're 4.
separate.
And they're in succession.
And it's got a gravel pit at the bottom, so the water starts seeping out rapidly.
I think we had some numbers at one point.
There are a series of calculations. There will still be water that escapes, which will go through the grass creek, which will go through and in and around the grass creek and down to the bottom. If we get these trees to grow, those guys will suck up more water than you know what to do with, and it sounds perfect. Yeah, it's an interesting system. We have seen that before, and it does work pretty well if the gravel underneath it gets in good, so. Questions, thoughts, errors, comments? The planning committee recommendation was to approve, based on final proof of no neighborhood condition, we'll leave that in there. And the modifications to the site plan, the following is the pea gravel becomes mulch, the new fence is marked as no greater than 42 high, 50% open, that is legally conforming. And the size and the species of the trees are noted, you've got that on there. That is the motion.
Second?
And it has been seconded. Any last chance for questions or comments? All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you so much for all your work, for getting these last things done. It's going to be great. I have every optimism, so.
And just to finish everything, we
Yes.
have come up with a sign for 1217, which we will post as soon as our sign makers complete it.
Which will be Wednesday.
So
Y'all are excellent. Thank you very much. There were some typical roof nail construction, and those are typical in projects like this, so.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you
For your
very
patience
much,
and your input.
and welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Let us move on. Peggy, you're on next for the budget. We're going to come back to the other planning issues.
So I didn't bring enough copies for everybody, but I brought some financial statements that there should be enough to share. Want some share mine? It's okay, let's go. Anyway, we haven't talked about the budget or our financial status in a while.
It's all yours.
We have
You need this.
$162,000 in unrestricted funds sitting in the bank, And then we have another 80 or so in restricted funds to back up, if we have a bad year, to back up our payment on the New Highland Park loan. So we're in a very good financial situation. Our unrestricted funds are down from last year. We've invested in paying down the loan considerably. We've invested in the master plan. We've invested in parks. And we have some pretty substantial money coming in before the end of the year. So from a balance sheet perspective, we're in great shape. And if, as we get near the end of the year, our position gets stronger, I think it might be worth considering again whether we want to pay down the loan another chunk. Or whether we want to invest additionally in parks or in some other aspect of the master plan. One way or another, we should probably deploy some funds as we get toward the end of the year. In terms of the income statement, falls over onto 2 pages because it's asked to do many things. The first column shows you where we are year-to-date in 2014. The second column is the full year for 2013, so it's not just year-to-date, it's got the extra 5 months tacked on. And then there's a comparison of those 2 periods, and then the final year shows what the 2014 budget is. There's one there. There's one floating around. No?
John.
They're gonna look. So some things to note about this. We have about $80,000 still coming in for Summerfest, which is beverage revenue. With the $80,000, we should be pretty close to even on Summerfest with where we were last year, which is good. We've got Tour of Homes is starting off well. It's got a good ways to go, but we should be getting another between $40,000 and $50,000 worth of revenue off Tour of Homes, and some expenses to go along with that. But to get this year, as we get through this year, one of the reasons for the comparison you're seeing between year-to-date and the full year last year is those 2 numbers are significant, adding up to give or take $130,000 to our bottom line. We have not yet set a grants or donations. We haven't yet put money out for grants and donations, and I'd like to talk about that in a second.
We haven't expended it, we didn't agree to put the same amount as we had last year.
Yes, so our budget is $15,000, we spent $15,000 last year. If we change how we handle grants this year, and want to have a little room, a cushion to say if we get some applications we'd like to spend more, we certainly have the money available to do that without putting any strain on our financial statement anywhere. And then there's kind of a peculiarity in how we handle our financial statements. We keep our entire mortgage payment on our income statement, so we use it like a cash flow statement until the end of the year, and then at the end of the year we put the principal payment over on the balance sheet, reducing our liability the way we're supposed to. So as you look at this statement, there's an $85,000 difference between 2014 and 2013, most of which will ultimately for 2014 move to the balance sheet like we did in 2013. So those are kind of our major outstanding issues. We're in the process of investing in the parks, and again, we have the money available to do that, and it's in line with our master plan and what we need to be doing as an organization. The bottom line shows a loss, but again, the loss still leaves us with $160-some thousand in cash in the bank available, and the loss will reverse as soon as we get the payments from the beverages and as the home tour kicks in. So we should end the year to the positive or to break even, depending on how much we choose to invest in parks as we go through the rest of the year, or other master plan or liability reduction efforts.
Yeah, this will be a great deal clearer in January 15th when we will have finished paying off John Howell, our part of the John Howell Park piece, when the revenues will be known from both the tour, which we know, and the advantage of knowing right away, and Summerfest, which we do not have. That advantage. Why don't you, if you have, this was all precipitated because Peggy was wanted to suggest that we still consider publicizing the grant program this year. Do you have something you want to specifically recommend on that?
Also, I wanted to bring the financial statements out. You guys need to see them now.
Well, they're readily available at
And
any
they're,
point.
yeah,
I mean,
so anytime you want to see them, anytime you want to see something for whatever department you're running,
There isn't a, so
They're easy to get.
the other way of summarizing it is a great deal clearer to people at a glance, but it's okay. I mean, I understand your point about the payments, but go forward here on the.
Peggy, I'm sorry, just 1 second before you turn to that.
yeah.
Is this 80,000 an estimate for the beverage, or has that been calculated?
That was 2013.
That was last year.
Oh, okay, so
And
we
it's
do not
zero this
know.
year.
We don't know. Pam believes it will be more or less the same, but it's slightly.
When will we know that amount?
October, November, I think we were talking about just before you got here, but last year, that didn't arrive until after, at one of the meetings in October, November, that check was presented to us. And it's, that's the way, let's just leave it and say that's the way it is, whether it's the way it should be or not. Hello, sir, come in and welcome. We'll be right with you. We'll get you right up
But it
here.
is one of the reasons why the cash flows associated with Summerfest are one of the reasons why we keep some cushion in the bank.
No, I'm sorry, I just misunderstood. I thought the 80,000 was for this year and it just hadn't come in,
Yes.
but I see here.
When you,
What is the debt still owed on the Highland Park?
New Highland Park debt is $591,000.
it's
So
in no,
big.
it's in no danger of evaporating in the next couple of
You
years.
know what, Jeff, I don't, it's probably not, because you've got this 85 over here. I think it's just over $500,000, like $510,000.
It's doing fine, but let me point it this way. If we were forced to sell those lots to a real estate developer at current market value, I'm assured that we would have plenty of money to pay off the debt. Not that we're in no way thinking about that.
Not if we could trade in the dollar.
I'm sorry? Yes, I was bringing that up.
But the way this is set up, we owe a little bit, about $510,000. We've got this $70,000 that can only be spent to pay down that debt as we get near the end. So really, we owe $430, $440 that we don't have reserved for it.
And if you count next year's payments and the pay down, it's really down to about $280.
Well, if I want to get to the end of it.
And if you and I both die sometime soon and leave half of our to it, that would pay it off. So it's almost gone.
Don't count.
No, we'll name it after you.
Depending on what we choose to put against equity, maybe 5 years.
Well, that'd be good.
5 years is highly optimistic, but I think that's great. I mean, this all assumes that the numbers proceed in the same, even though we did spend a chunk on the master plan, even though we spent a lot on John Howell. There's some other items that are always looming over us that could be very expensive and we need to have cash in a hurry. Let's interrupt this if you don't mind, just so we can hear from you.
Okay, well, good evening. It's a light crowd today. Sorry I'm late. I had to go to the Roundstown meeting first. They scheduled 3 meetings at the same, well, there's 3 meetings scheduled,
Sure.
second Tuesday.
Save the best for last, we understand.
Well, you guys are actually second. But,
Oh.
as far as crime, I mean, we're still maintaining a 25% overall crime reduction on 601B in Virginia-Highlands. We have had some issues, of course, on Lady Lane. We're still trying to increase visibility on Lady Lane. We're still trying to increase the visibility along the Ponce de Leon and Highland corridor late nights. That's where we're seeing our robberies. People coming from the MJQ and, you know, people that's in the bars, so late nights, we're still, trying to increase visibility, the details along those corridors. Like I say, every watch has made it our priority to, increase visibility on Maiden Lane.
What's the main issue in Maiden Lane? Is it break-ins and
Well, the drinking and,
hanging out?
the hanging out, the homeless. I mean, then, you know, some of the people that come to MJQ, or, you know, they park along, or go to the restaurants, they'll park along Maiden Lane, and the cars get broken into. Going to Chipotle, they'll park on Maiden Lane.
Where's
and
Maiden
car-
Lane?
It's like,
It used to be an alley.
it's parallel, yeah, it's.
Runs between Ponce Place and
Exactly.
where does it stop?
Well,
Bonaventure
It runs
or
between,
Frederica?
Ponce de Leon, runs parallel in between Ponce de Leon, and I want to say that's with the St. Charles.
Yeah.
St. Charles. So, like I say, I mean, you know, when I look at the crime stats, pretty much, that's where most of the violent crime is occurring, like Maiden Lane, Ponce de Leon, in North Highland at nights, you know, when patrons are leaving the club, and, you know, or the restaurant. So, I mean, we are aware of that issue. As it pertains to property crime, I know that, you know, larceny from autos is a constant. Auto break-ins is a constant here in the Virginia-Highlands, and we're down 35% with the vehicle break-in, and 50% as it pertains to residential burglary. So I think the extra resources that we devoted to the Virginia-Highlands area, and just along the Ponce de Leon corridor, I think it's really paying out. So that's all I have to report on crime. Any concerns that I may need to take back to the precinct? Anything, any specific concerns that you all may have, or do you have anything?
Thank you very much for coming.
All right, have a good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all. Back to, you have, I think you had some thoughts about what we can.
So I know, last month you guys talked about the grant program, and I wasn't here, but we are coming up to the grant giving period. And we've always done that in sort of a informal way. And last year we talked about making it not necessarily more formal, but more open, publicizing it a little more, see if perhaps some other neighborhood organizations might be wanting to apply and have something that we would be wanting to sponsor. So Jess and I put together a grant program description. It's a one-pager, and a grant application, also a one-pager. I'd really like to get these two documents up, to ask John to put them up on the web, and maybe put a piece out about them on the e-blast, so that we can move our grant program along this year and make it a little bit more professional in how it's handled. It does a couple of things. It opens us up to having people who might not necessarily think about ask for some support to do good things for the neighborhood. The downside of that is we might have to say no to somebody if something inappropriate comes in, but it does kind of define what we want to do with the grants. It also makes a platform where people who apply for grants every year actually have a way to do it properly, and it's a reminder for them, and it asks them to get back to us about what they do, which tends not to happen because there's no structure to it at all. But we've also kept it about as simple as you can possibly keep anything, and certainly not a paperwork burden either for us or for the applicant. So putting something like this out there it's a policy change. It creates a policy, but it's pretty low risk. I mean, if we try the policy and we don't like it,
Do you have a
always
specific
change
motion
it.
here?
Well,
Yeah.
or
I'd like to see if there's a specific motion here before we keep on. We'll have plenty of time on. Go ahead and give a specific amount you were thinking of allocating.
I would like to make a motion to adopt this policy, you don't have to have an amount to adopt the policy. I would be happy to have an amount as a separate motion, and I think that would be entirely appropriate. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this grant program description and this grant program application, and that we ask John to publicize it through our normal VHCA ordinance.
Is there a second? It's been seconded. Jennifer?
Well, we had a robust discussion about this last month, and we talked a lot about the pros and cons, and it really seemed that the cons outweighed the pros for introducing it this year. And what we had discussed last month is that it would make more sense to announce the grants at our annual meeting and then roll out this new program right after. So I feel like at this point it's rushed. I know Springdale Park has already put together a huge proposal and already submitted their request probably a month ago, Jack? Not more, maybe 6 weeks ago. And I guess, and the other thing we discussed in detail was that this year we've had so many huge expenditures, parks and the master plan, that the thought would be that next year there would be more money, so it would be a better time to roll out this more robust program. And I think you mentioned that, you know, it's possible we could get an application and we can't fund it because the request is inappropriate. I think it's possible that we just get a request and we don't have enough funds. So we could get, you know, 50 legitimate, wonderful ideas, but we're not going to be able to fund 50 requests. So I guess I feel like we discussed this last month and voted on it, and the vote was, again, to announce, to use this platform and give it more time to develop for next year, rather than at this point rushing to get it out and trying processing and sorting through the applications and making the grant awards by our September meeting. I just feel because of the timing and because much more funds will be available next year, it is better to wait until this fall to announce this program and give it time to develop and use it for next year.
Why don't we take those one by one? We have
Why don't we let some other folks comment? Is anybody else would like to?
I wouldn't be concerned necessarily about the amount, because there are some areas where we've actually not spent as much as last year. Like we haven't paid for sidewalks, for example, that's less than last year. So I think there's room at least to increase it a little bit. We had earmarked 15,000, we could increase that. And it definitely seems like two different conversations of one is the amount for this year and one's the, adopting the application. And I think if we do, could we agree to adopt this kind of structure for it and agree to it for next year?
Maybe I misunderstood the motion. So was the motion about money, or was it more about adopting the policy or
I
procedure?
do think they go together. I think
Well, we had, the discussion last month was 2 reasons why we should wait. And the 2 reasons were, 1, it's rushed, and 2, we've had huge expenditures this year, and we will have more money available next year. So it makes more sense to introduce a more robust grant program when there's more money available. I mean, if we get 50 applications this year,
We still don't say that yes to them all.
We could get
no,
this year
but we're
anyway.
not going to. To me, it just feels rushed, particularly given that it's the middle of August, and we'd have to make these decisions.
Did you have a
in
chance
3
to listen
weeks.
to the discussion last month?
I just heard about a second.
What did we vote on exactly?
Yeah, did we actually vote
I don't
on,
remember.
if we voted, then
I
we
think we
issued?
did.
I don't know.
So I guess I have a couple of thoughts, John, about we don't have to do them. The last thing we want to do, in my opinion, is encourage people to apply and then say, I mean, it's a good plan, we can't afford it. So let's not even ask for applications if we can't.
We don't necessarily tell them we can't afford it, we just say we respectfully decline your grant request.
Oh, that's
We'll
worse.
always-
But John,
You
that's
can't
the
get to all of them,
last thing.
Yeah, you're not-
That's the last thing you want. You want to tell people that it wasn't suitable because it was a great idea, but you don't have the money. It was not a great idea for the following reasons, so you can modify it and work on it. or we'll do it in part. So that's why I think they go together. And the last piece I want to start with here is that when we are under no obligation to give a group a grant year after year, no legal obligation. Morally and expectation-wise, I think it's quite different. We have supported Spark since they sprung into existence and asked for help. We've given Grady money whenever they've been able to get their requests in, and they're in for this year. And Inman's been a little funny, and will be a little funnier still next year because, and we can hold off a little bit on this so we talk about what's going on at Inman with the softball field renovations and the Field of Dreams, because I think there's a real chance this board will be considering, at least looking at the possibility of spending more money there. The library has consistently been funded. Y'all all have the list. I think I've sent it around of where the money went. Those are all institutions in need. None of them have quit needing the money. And so I'm trying to understand for applicants, Peggy, I don't think that it's been hard to get reports in. I think most people have reported very nicely. The library and Spark, Inman, Grady was a bit of work, but I think we've got them going to report. And Trees Atlanta reports, that's another giver. So I'm just curious, we're either going to give more money or we're going to make a kind of sudden decision about folks that we have supported that really represent popular constituencies in the neighborhood that our citizens use. We didn't pick them abstractly. These are widely used: parks, schools, library, trees. So these are popular things that we've done for years, and I just personally can't. So either we need more money, or we're going to cut to them, or we're going to say, hey, that was a great grant, thanks for doing it. Sorry, for no particular reason. So I'd like to at least have the money, because the money to me knows that's the boundaries. And that's why I suggested today, if you want to do this, you suggest a certain amount more, because that tells us what we're looking at over the amount we have. And if we decide suddenly the Trees Atlanta is no good, the library is no good, we can decide that. This board gets to do it every year.
Okay, so I went to the grant meeting last year, and I believe I went to the grant meeting the year before. And I have never in my professional career attended meetings like that before. It was startling to me. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice, and we talked about this at the meeting last year, if this process was a little more open, a little more structured, and a little more comparable as we look from one application to the next. Not saying how much we give anybody, not saying who we give money to, but just saying that for a process, for an organization that's responsible, is there a way to make this process a little, not a lot more structured, but a little bit more structured? And we decided at that meeting that that would be a good thing. And putting these documents together has not actually been rushed. It's actually been a process that's been started and vetted and reviewed and edited over the course of quite a few months. So that was the genesis of suggesting a process, something that's consistent from one application to another, something that the applicants can know what it looks like, and not stopping them from putting a complicated and in-depth application together if that's there, but simply to have a cover sheet that says this is what it's about, where we can look from one cover sheet to the next and compare them, where the dates are written down, where the selection criteria are very broad, but are set out in a way that's responsible and clear. So that was the genesis of these two documents. Now, when we made these two documents, we were not thinking of a situation where we had $250,000 in the bank like we happened to last year, or $165,000 like we happened to this year. We were thinking, what is a process that will be appropriate in a year where Summerfest might not happen, you know, where we might have very little money. And this process is simple enough that it applies in lean times and strong times. So that was the genesis of the process. It's been in process for a year. I would have liked to have gotten it passed a month ago or 2 months ago, and it didn't, but I think we have time to implement it for this year, and if we need to modify it for next year, we can do that. It's policy, it's a process. That's why this particular motion is just about this program. I think it would be entirely appropriate to follow this motion with another motion about the size of the budget for this year. And at the meeting last year, we did talk about the pros and cons of increasing our grant budget from last year to this year. It didn't end up getting in the preliminary budget in January because we were uncertain about whether we would have good weather during Summerfest, whether, you know, who would be putting together the tour of homes, but it seems to be going pretty well.
I just have a quick comment, just to clarify, I'm not saying the development of these documents was rushed, you're right, it took many, many months. I'm saying it's rushed to introduce something on August 11th, or I don't know when the next voice is going out, and the deadline's September 1st. That is what is rushed. I would just much prefer to see this rolled out in a more systematic and meaningful way, and we can roll it out at the annual meeting even. I don't think.
Then why don't we vote on it now and you can present it at
We
the annual
already
meeting?
did. We already did vote on it last month.
I mean.
I'm sorry you weren't
presented
here,
this
but we
month.
voted on it.
It's presented, it was discussed last month, it's being discussed again this month. If you want to roll it out at the annual meeting next month, this would be the time to vote on it so you can roll it out next month. It wouldn't be to say, let's start talking about it next August. It would be, let's talk about it now so we can present it at the annual meeting, if you want to have it in force for next year.
It's also a good opportunity, like Jack was saying, you don't want to, like we've already had a lot of organizations sort of historically. I think to get them to just fill out this application is not a heavy lift. I don't think that's a big ask to ask organizations to do that. So having it presented at the annual meeting, saying, thank you, here's your grant for the year, here's what we have developed for next year, I think that's good timing and that would be good expectation setting for everybody who gets a grant. Because otherwise, maybe it's semantics, but in my mind, a grant is something you apply for. Nonprofits are used to applying for grants, and there's almost always standard documentation and processes that outline it. So I would totally agree that we should have something in place to, you know, guide that process and set expectations like this does.
I thought one of the other things we were struggling over last year at the meeting to decide about giving out grants was the selection criteria. And we didn't have anything in place at that point in time. Aside from the application process, I felt that that was something that the board felt like they needed in determining what grants to grant or not. So could you still incorporate that in deciding on the grants for this coming year without having the application process?
Well, the board can do whatever it thinks is the best in any given situation. I think most of our applicants, in terms of what people put in, I agree with you, Jess, and I agree with you, Peggy, that most people apply for this. Most of our applicants are applying, and most of them give us this information without ever filling out that form, but it is good to have a formal form. The grants have a couple of purposes I want to point out. It's not this abstract, disconnected from the rest of the board policy piece, and that's the only last part I would throw out here, because we're making a small ado about $15,000 or $20,000, when in fact we're blessed with a hardworking community and a helpful highway department that has given us a chance to make a lot more than that. We're very lucky in that respect. But the board, I think as I see it, it's been a helpful way for the association over the years, both before I was involved. Wendy, please comment if you like. to express its broad opinions and to support for institutions that it does not have directly formal ways to contribute to. For example, even though we had an ed committee this year and wound up with no one to chair it and an almost dormant committee, and I personally regret that we created it and think it ought to come back out, because in fact, it was a one-time crisis that it was addressing, and it does not need. We've always been invested in the schools, but not in educational policy, which is really part of, we have tried to deal with planning issues about schools through planning, but the policy stuff we've stayed out of. VHCA has historically, by and large, stayed out of most of those as an organization. Individuals, some of them directly involved in VHCA, have been involved, but typically not the organization for many years. So yet we support it. And one of the things that I think really speaks to some parents here who have us, who are many citizens who have cynical views of VHCA because they may only read some things next door, are heartened by the fact that the association takes its money that are generated through our two big events and dumps it back into schools, and that really helps in a concrete way demonstrate it. Hence, last year, however loose the procedure was, it seemed to me to make a lot of sense personally to wait and work with the great EPTA, however disorganized they were for the second year in a row, to get their applications in, to get that money then, because it reflects all our priorities. And I think you're going to find that's true. We're going to at least be faced with that choice this year at Inman, and it's in the next agenda item. But we have been campaigning with the help of the PTA for some changes in the physical layout at Inman relative to the expansion that we think will make a big difference in the community life at Inman, that will tie it back to the school. And I think that we think it'll work, but we're going to have to put up money to make it work. The school board has said they will not. I'm talking about an improved, handsome softball field so that the team no longer has to travel to distant spots. So my suggestion would be, and what we talked about on the planning committee, was that our grant to Inman this year, where we've never historically done a grant, nobody's ever come to us and asked for it, except for special needs, like the technology a few years ago when we led a huge effort, would be that we start setting aside money. It's money on paper, but it's quite real. It's a commitment of the board toward the improved softball field. We're going to be looking next year, at luck would have it, at the very same time, thanks to the school board, not our choice, at trying to activate the Bruno Memorial, which we never got going, the Memorial to Warren Bruno, which was going to be the Field of Dreams restoration. And now we know how to put up granite walls, and thanks to John Howell Park and many other amusing experiences, and we know how to do sidewalks. And that's a big commitment directly for him, but also for us. So I would like, rather than spend that money now, I thought this was a great way for us to commit $5,000 to Inman and put it in a fund that's dedicated to one of those two things and announce it as a grant that will be for one of those two purposes. That's my suggestion. We don't have to do it at all. But that's a tangible way of supporting Inman. And we get notes from other neighborhood associations about what are we doing for Inman. Inman Park donates and others, and I'd like to say, well, we are throwing the money in there. It's just going to come later. It may come in year 3, and it may be $20,000 or $25,000 at one chunk, but we'll allocate it chunk by chunk.
And that would be considered their grant for this year?
And I think that's the way to frame it, that it doesn't require cash right now, which I'm a little tiny bit worried about, and I'll talk about that, or we can talk about it now.
Well, before we get too far afield, I just wanted to address Jess's point. You know, I think grant program could be a bit of a misnomer. It could be grant and community gift program.
Right.
Because if we give money to Virginia-Highland Church for opening up their facilities and letting us hold many meetings there, that is a community gift, to thank them for supporting our community and allowing us to meet there. Same for the library, same for Garrison. So I agree with you that there are grants that nonprofits apply for. I think some of the money that we give is just, a community gift to organizations that have helped us as a community. And, you know, certainly providing big meeting space for all those master plan meetings was a great benefit to the community. So that's just a community gift. I don't need the church to apply.
Yeah.
To say, give us money for letting us have your
So
meeting. That's a gift.
I'm 100% in favor of changing it to the grant and community gift program, but that adjustment, would you be in favor of this motion to accept this grant and community gift program?
As a methodology for letting people who are not otherwise engaged approach us for money.
For 2015. Well, you changed the motion, I think, to introducing this at the annual meeting for next year's grants. Because we already voted it. Yeah.
But I'd like to get it set now.
Was that yes, or I don't know?
Yeah, what
I
is
feel
the
like there's
motion?
something I'm missing here. I don't know. I don't understand what
The only thing I
I mean,
know
besides
that you,
people, the deadline for this, I get that, like, it's too late, it's not July 1st through September 1, people don't have adequate time to fill that out, so I get that, but.
you know, I
That's pretty
would,
much it. It's August 11th.
Right.
And it's rushed to introduce a new procedure and a new policy.
When you're right in the middle of the period during
Yeah.
which people are, yeah, I mean, when I first heard you talk, and I still do support everything that this is leading towards, more visible process, a more structured process. But I think I'm just less comfortable than I thought I was initially about putting that process in place right now. I like the idea of announcing it at the annual meeting and saying this is what we will work with going forward. It shows that we're proactive, we've identified an issue that we wanted to address, and we will in the upcoming year. I guess I'm less than comfortable trying to put the process in place right now for the remainder of a 6-week period that, you know.
That's fine, so we're going to adopt it now, we're going to present it at the annual meeting, and this will be the program we use going forward.
That's something I know I can support.
Okay, that's fine.
further comments?
And then, as we're adopting it, I just wondered, Peggy, since we will have time next year, if we want to change these dates. September 1st, like getting applications in by September 1st, and us trying to figure it all out and decide by the annual meeting, I would just propose moving these back 1 month. So for going forward, and it's summer, and all these crazy parents like me who are on summer break, you can't pull it all together.
When do we usually have the meeting?
We always have the meeting, it needs to be in September because of our bylaws, you take, so.
Like the grant meetings, October.
I have 3 dates that, no, it's always been in August. I mean, toward the second or third or fourth week in August. Because there's time among the, I want to talk a little bit about when we get to it. Lola had this ready to go, but she's not here. She's got some dates that we wanted to suggest for.
So you want to make it August 15th?
No, I'm saying move it back earlier.
August 1st is more realistic.
June, yeah, how about June 1st to August 1st? That's still summer. I'd move it back to May. May 1st
I mean, I
to
don't
August
care
1st.
when they send it in, they're just.
No, I know, but since
So
we're
that's fine.
adopting it,
May 1st, the way that, these seem to come in sort of at the last minute, so,
so that's why August 1st is a good.
That's what August 1st meant. That's why August still gives us time to get back to people and say, look, these numbers don't add up, or you forgot that, or, I mean, we're not going to be trouble. We want to work with people, not. I
no
do.
problem.
All right, why don't we just finish this? Is that agreeable to everyone here? Are there further thoughts and wishes? So the motion is to adopt these with slightly modified dates. We'll have a whole year to play with it, to roll it out at the meeting with a presentation that we will be trying to open it up a little bit next year. And I think it should be retitled the Community Gift and Grant Program, because I think that is a key distinction, and I appreciate your making it that. So
So let me modify the motion to adopt this document with 2 changes, changing it to grant and community gift program and changing the application dates to May 1st to August 1st. And this grant application form, I move that we adopt those 2 documents now for presentation at the September meeting. as the VHCA's new policy for grants and community gifts.
Second?
Seconded, or is there further discussion? All in favor? I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to move on if we could, just a couple of things.